Okay, so as I was studying North Korea in just some personal studies, I came to realize that North Korea loves to use ancient Korean history and most specifically ancient Korean myths in order to try and bolster their own legitimacy as a government. And so I wanted to go through and talk about just some of the different things that North Korea does in order to do this. This sort of way of bolstering themselves comes from what Japan did to Korea back in the day. As Japan was trying to replace all of Korean history, Korean language, Korean everything with Japanese stuff, Korea kind of fought back and built this really strong Korean nationalism that didn't really exist up until the Japanese invasion. This includes things such as history, mythology. Japan tried to impose Mount Fuji as this big important thing, and this guy named Jimmu. But then they fought back and said, instead of Mount Fuji, we have Mount Baekju. Instead of Jimmu, we have Donggun. One of the big things that Japan tried to do is this idea called Naisen Itai, and it's saying that Japan and Korea are one, showing how Japan's this older brother figure that Korea should look up to and learn from. But then North Korea was able to turn this around and put in Kim Il-sung as the older brother figure, or the eternal president as he's known. And he became that guiding figure instead of Japan. The first thing that Kim Il-sung specifically, and just kind of the North Korean regime did, is they added to that Korean identity. They built up Korean nationalism, and they fought back against Japanese nationalism. You have different things like, why is Kim Il-sung awesome? He fought Japan throughout his whole life. He was this big freedom fighter. He fought from Mount Baekju, which I'll talk about a little bit later, why Mount Baekju shows up so much, which is all these big Korean myths. He also focused on the importance of Korean purity, and that's why it's so difficult to go and visit North Korea. He wanted there to be this idea that Koreans are this pure race that needs to remain clean from the outside world. And in order to do this, he cut them off from the rest of the world. But North Koreans really have bought into this idea that we're this really simple, pure race that needs to remain untarnished. The biggest thing from history that he pulled from, kind of quote-unquote history, is the legend of Donggun, which, as you all know, there was the king of the skies, and his son came down and ruled over on Mount Baekju. And a tiger and a bear came to this son of the king of the heavens and asked if they could become human. He gave them some garlic and some mugwort and said, go live in a cave for 100 days. Eventually, the bear became a person, married this guy, and they had a son named Donggun, and Donggun became kind of the founder of Korea. Well, if you do a little search online for Donggun in North Korean news, he is all over the place. They are constantly trying to prove that Donggun existed. In 1993, I think it was, they discovered artifacts from Donggun, and they are always showing how Donggun was this real person. And the reason that's so important is that if they can prove that Donggun was a real person and that Korea is this really special kind of mythical place, then one that adds to the idea that Koreans are this special race and needs to remain pure, and that's why North Koreans need to stay separated from the outside world. But also, they try and prove that Donggun was from the area that North Korea currently is in. So that shows why they're the superior nation or the superior government as opposed to South Korea. So one big thing from the myth of Donggun that they pull from is Mount Baekju. You also find Mount Baekju a lot in North Korean news and propaganda. You'll see that Mount Baekju is the symbol of North Korea. There are several articles that I found written by North Koreans where they said literally Mount Baekju is the symbol of North Korea. And so they have this really big place in their heart for Mount Baekju and how it symbolizes the strength and fortitude of North Koreans. Kim Il-sung says how he fought from Mount Baekju against the Japanese. Kim Jong-il was supposedly born from Mount Baekju, just like Donggun was, adding to his legitimacy. When Kim Jong-il died, Mount Baekju shook, and the ice inside of the mountain supposedly cracked. All these crazy things, and it's all surrounding Mount Baekju, and that's kind of in counter to the Japanese idea of Mount Fuji, which Kim Il-sung was able to replace Mount Baekju. And then Pyongyang. So the capital that Donggun set up was called Asadal, and this supposedly is exactly where Pyongyang is today. And this is another way in which North Korea tries to show that we're the real Korea out of the two. And that's because our capital goes back for centuries. Again, they're always looking for different archaeological finds. Pretty much every 10 years, you'll find something coming up in North Korean news about how they've proven that Pyongyang is really acidoal. They find little villages that are 10,000 years old that proves that it goes back for centuries and all these little things. And Pyongyang, like Mount Baekju, is another symbol of North Korea. You find statues of Kim Il-sung. You find there's this giant pillar or this giant gate. I can't remember the name of, but it's really famous. It's all these things, and it's to kind of point to focus at Pyongyang. And then the Kim family really, really loves using ancient Korean myths. This picture is actually kind of one of the things that caught my eye and made me wonder, like, what is up? And a few years, actually, I think it was only a few months ago, Kim Jong-un said that he found a unicorn cave. And I was like, that's just crazy. Like, nobody would actually believe that. But after studying how they like to use Korean mythology in order to support themselves, if you look, Kim Jong-un has been facing a lot of problems as he replaced his father, Kim Jong-il. And so it's not exactly a unicorn, but they supposedly discovered this area where this mythical beast that an ancient king of Goryeo rode was put to rest. And this unicorn is supposed to come back around the same time as a great leader. And so they use this history and this mythology in order to try and bolster support for Kim Jong-un at a time when he's having a hard time. So I found that as we come to understand kind of this use of mythology and history in North Korean rhetoric, that it really helps to make sense of a lot of the craziness that goes on in North Korea. Things like unicorn caves and that sort of thing start to make a little more sense when you see it in the light of this is used in order to help the regime become more popular with the people. It's used to kind of deflect things such as starvation and people going to internment camps and poor work conditions, because we've been able to prove that North Korea has this mythical background, that the Kim family is related to these mythical figures. And it's kind of in some ways a lot like the media in the West, where we see, you know, some famous figure has this bad thing or good thing, and it kind of deflects from the problems that we're facing today. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Reading the Communist Manifesto against Solids.